Mindset Podcast. We're your guide as you make your way through life, getting better 1% every day. We believe that life is lived and true victory won through adversity. Nothing easy is ever worth it.
Rob, dude, how's it going?
I'm good, Gene. How are you, buddy?
Good. You're in your office / basement / gym.
Yes, I am in the office / basement. The gym is like maybe 20 feet that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've got several pictures you sent me of it. I'm gonna splice one in there so people
Okay.
can see what we're dealing with. You have quite the home. There's like garage gym, but I don't know. Is there like basement gym? I'm sure there is.
There is. It just takes a little more work because you got to drop it off in the garage and carry it down the stairs.
That's the first workout, is getting it in there.
Workout. I'm afraid to move at this point, Gene.
Well, man, I've had you on here before. You're I'm going to say good friend of mine. Known you for, think about this, pretty much a decade.
Yeah.
Kind of weird, right?
Might even be a little longer now. Pretty
weird. Yeah, and we've just kept up over the years, which is kind of awesome.
Yeah.
But you run I'm going to say healthy business. You guys have always kicked ass from my point of view. Sparkbox, always been one of my idols in terms of businesses to look up to, and kind of in the same space, although I'm much smaller and always have been. And I've just considered you a leader. So that's what we're here to just kind of spitball around and see what happens. But first, I want to know, because every time we talk, you share like PRs with me, and we talk about stuff all the time, which is awesome. But where does working out, where does your personal fitness fit in your life of, I don't even know what your title is. The titles, I know you're the type of guy, the titles don't matter necessarily, but what is your title with Sparkbox?
Founder and president.
Founder and president. So you're the HMFIC.
Probably.
Anyway, where does your physical fitness and working out, where does that rank on level of importance for you?
It's pretty up there. I mean, there's a bunch of things in my life that I have to prioritize together to like stay in balance, right? Like just to take a small issue with your question, where does it rank? That's hard because I don't think it ranks above family and my marriage and work and other things.
Like two different lists. Yeah. Yeah.
But it's in balance with those things, right? Because like when I'm not taking care of myself, then I'm not as good a dad. I'm not as good a husband. I'm not as good a leader at my business. That is part of my job, both in my house and in my work, to make sure that I'm at my best. And I do that by making sure that I'm taking care of myself physically, mentally, spiritually, and have all those things in balance with each other.
Yeah.
So it's a hard. I reject the premise of your question, and would like to say it's really important. It's something that's on my regular cadence and on my calendar, and I don't skip many workouts.
Yeah, that's hard to do for a lot of people. A lot of people will let those excuses, like whatever, being busy or the other things, sort of compete with that. I imagine you have a lot competing with that.
Yeah, I mean, always. I think that's just kind of life, right? Like we all have things that are competing with for our time and attention, and like where you stack those things up and how you approach is what you are, right? Like what's the old saying is like your habits and what you spend your time on is who you are and what you prioritize. And
pretty much
like it gets back to that idea that I'm a better dad, a better husband, and a better business person if I'm taking care of all of the things that I need to.
Yeah, I've found that a lot of times that when I've made the worst decisions, or I've acted irrationally or whatever, is usually when I'm not taking care of myself.
Yeah.
And that's kind of bad.
Well, it's just not sustainable, right?
No.
And
not
at all. As I don't know if you know this, Gene. We're both aging, right? The same rate everybody else is, but
I don't know about you.
but we've known each other for at least a decade, which means we're a decade older than we were.
Yeah, it's kind of weird.
And like the small things we do add up.
They do. They really do, especially when you're in business for yourself and like a year goes by so fast. Like, you just file your taxes. Next thing you know, crap, I got to do that again. And you're like, what happened? It's kind of nuts. We've had a lot of conversations recently on some episodes about aging as well. And like where that, like coming to grips with a lot of stuff. And I think that's where we are as Gen Xers potentially.
Yeah.
Kind of getting there.
Oh,
I don't think about it. No. So dude, I've talked to you a couple times and is it safe to say you kind of came off a hard year business wise?
Yeah, I would say 2023 is the hardest year ever.
Really?
Full stop. Yeah, full stop.
Wow, that's a bold statement. What made it that way?
It was one of the toughest business conditions and climates that I've ever seen. And within the first couple months of the year, actually the first 6 weeks, we had a lot of clients not renew, a lot of things not go our way, a lot of biz dev pipeline stuff that was, moving in the right direction just evaporated. Yeah. And that was kind of the story of, 2023. I'm a numbers junkie. Like I track just about everything.
I've used several spreadsheets you put together for people at conferences you've spoken at, myself personally, for projects.
So we had things that just were changed overnight. Like, the cycle time on our pipeline tripled. Like it went from 37 days to over 90 days. And the assumptions we make and the forecasts we make and the business plans that we all make are based on things that we think we know or trends that we've identified that we think we can count on.
Right.
And that whole idea of, all models are wrong. Some are useful. That's only true if the assumptions we're using in those models actually continue to hold water. And, in my experience and the other businesses that I work with is a bunch of those assumptions fundamentally changed in 2023. And that took some recalibration. And that uneasy feeling that you kind of get in this pit of your stomach where you're like, this doesn't make any sense to me anymore. I think that happens when you you don't know what to trust. And when some of those fundamental changes or from the fundamental things you take for granted, like, oh, this feels like this, or this usually happens, then this happens. When that stops working, it throws everything, because you have to rethink about all the things that you think you've learned over again.
That's got to be scary.
It was an adventure, that's for sure.
So you talked about trusting your gut, basically. Like, how much does that sort of factor into how you I mean, I don't want to talk about like forecasting. That's a whole rabbit hole. But how much is just trusting your gut are you doing day to day running your business? And let's qualify it, because you guys, how many employees did you have going into 2023?
Almost 65.
65. So that's a lot of to lead and to, I know you, so I know you feel like you're taking care of these people. And I know they take care of you, you take care of them, all that stuff, but it's heavy. And I don't want to be like wah CEO. Nobody cares about what the CEO feels like, but it's a real stress. But how much is it just intuition?
It's not for me, very little of it's intuition.
I think we're very different that way, and that's why I asked that.
I'm a numbers guy. I like to track everything. My team has heard me say about 1 billion times, I think we make decisions for 2 reasons. 1 is because we have data to back it up, and 2, it's to get data. That's it. And wow. And then I'll layer into the fact that I fundamentally believe that both leadership and management are skill sets that you have to invest in, that you can get better at. And if you're not doing those things and getting better and working at those things that are quantifiable, then you are probably not rising to the place you should be.
Wow. That's a bold statement. You say it's quantifiable to be getting better as a leader. Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, I think there's been
kind of baking my noodle a little bit.
A bunch of studies and a bunch of research on what makes good leaders, how people respond, and how to, inspire, right? Like, and there's all kinds of books and all kinds of things you can ingest. And I think that if you're doing that work, as well as the work about, you, right? Like that's part of the whole being a leader is understanding yourself and where your strengths and weaknesses are, and how are you going to show up in stress moments and how are you going to show up in good moments, right?
Wow.
Because like one of the most fundamental things about being a leader that I've really had to come to grips with running my company with, I think it's been 16 years now, is almost no matter what room I walk in, the expectation is I'm able to hold it.
Okay.
That's my job.
Wow.
If I'm in the room, is I have to hold it. And there are some things that, like, I'm a human, you're a human, we're all humans, leaders are humans. Yeah. But if we're trying to inspire our team, like how we respond to things and how we approach things, leadership matters. It always, always, always matters. People notice, they pay attention. And if we want to get the most out of both of our humans and our own potential, we have to be very, very intentional about it. And that's where I think, I think that's the biggest divide between, there is people that say, well, some people are just natural born leaders, and maybe, right? Maybe they have some quality where they fall into by default. But if
I think you might be responding to just charisma in that sense.
Yeah. But if you really want to be intentional, that means having to make a choice,
right?
To do something or not do something. You better understand what those choices are and what the impacts of those things are.
Wow. So no shooting for the hip from the hip for Rob. I love that, man. And I was just talking to my my sensei. He was promoted recently. He's 10th degree black belt now, which is pretty much the highest level that you can get to.
Wow.
And we were having a really deep conversation. He was talking about how he has become, over the past like 3 or 4 years, very careful about what he says to other people. Not from a like, I don't want to be canceled.
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's a lot of that when we're talking here. A lot of people could maybe could think about it from that angle of like, well, they're just covering their ass or whatever. Yeah, there's a part of that, but also like you genuinely want to communicate, right? You genuinely want people to do the things that you think needs to be done to have that company or that project or whatever move in the right direction. They're not going to listen to you. They're not going to believe in it. They're not going to do the things that you want that should be done, in your opinion or whatever. If you communicate poorly, if you're not leading, like it's just not going to happen. And he was talking about how he's just so super careful about the way he communicates and the things he says, and he sort of almost plans it out. It's kind of amazing to think about that from a systems level, from a managing 63 to 65 people level. It's a lot of stress, dude.
No, but I think you're exactly. I mean, it can be stressful, but anything can be stressful if you let it be another job, right? But I think that you've nailed it, right? Like those being intentional about how we communicate, what we communicate, will shape what's heard and how it's heard and how it's interpreted, right? And like the. And I realize this is the way my brain works because I'm a numbers junkie and love formulas and things like that, right? But I think that like the baseline for so much of this is trust.
Okay.
And we have to have trust first if you want people to be able to follow you and believe what you say. And that comes down to being consistent and to believing that you have their best interest in mind, right? And it's in a business context, it gets a little funky because, my job is to have both care for the people deeply and care for the success of the business. In a hard year, sometimes those things get in conflict.
Right. That makes sense. Yeah, for sure. Well, that's the crux of the situation. What are some ways that you work on building trust? Like and I'm specifically talking about say, employees?
Yeah, I think a huge part of it is transparency, education, and honesty. What I want my employees to trust more than anything is that what I say, I mean, and that I'm telling them the whole truth.
Yeah.
And, one of the deals that I've made since the beginning of running this business is you can ask me whatever you want as an employee. And it's my job to know that if I'm allowed to answer that or not you. It's not on you to filter your questions. It's my job to temper the answer if needed, right? And I believe in pretty much full transparency,
really,
up until the point where it would harm somebody else. So
what would that look like? What would harming someone else look like? Like sharing what each other makes or something? Like what do you?
It could be that. But we have pay bands and full compensation systems and all of that. So everybody knows, what level somebody else is and basically where their pay band is.
Yeah, they're not dumb. I mean,
no,
yeah.
But I think
You
it's
hire dumb people.
like, along with that comes like some other values that I have, and is I don't throw people under the bus, right? Like,
right. That's important.
So, I believe my job as a leader and, president of my company is I'm also sometimes the person who jumps on the grenades. Like, that's what I try to convince and talk to my leaders about. Hey, if somebody's lobbing grenades into our camp, I would love to see a race to get on it. And I can do that by demonstrating that same kind of behavior, right?
Right. Wow. Yeah, man. I was listening to that. I was thinking like a surefire way to lose respect from your team is to shit talk other people in front of your team.
That's right.
You ever been in a situation where somebody's shit talking somebody else, or maybe you work somewhere where your boss was shit talking somebody else?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can't. There's nothing good that can come of it.
I don't imagine you've ever done that, but have you ever had that happen in your organization? Had to deal with it?
Of course.
Yeah.
And it's the thing that
I
believe
have. That's why
we have to remind people is, yes, it might feel good in the moment. They might get nodding heads across the room, right?
Right.
But the next time something happens, everybody's going to be wondering, are they going to talk about me that way?
Well, yeah, they know. They're not wondering, they know.
Know that. And that'll erode trust. If trust is the foundation for everything, you can't have that.
Yeah. Man, it's hard.
No, it's none of this is easy. Like that's
Yeah, man. Wow. So, all right. So you say 2023 was like the hardest year you've ever faced, full stop. What do you think it was that made the? I mean, I can't say the industry, but I mean, what do you think it was that made the clients that you kind of look at go sideways on you?
I think it was a couple things. I've kind of broken it down this way. I think, some of it was in the tech world, the immense amount of money that was spent second half of 20, all of 21 and 22. So there was a lot of investment and there was a little pullback from industry to realize some of that investment. I think it was a little bit overspend in some cases.
Right.
So some of that investment was front loaded, and last year was a pullback year. I think that with the inflation numbers, the overall economy, that made the cost of capital go up much higher.
Yeah, we saw that for sure.
And when capital costs more, investment goes down in things that we typically work on.
Yeah.
If I can, put my money in a savings account and make 7%, then I have to, anything I invest in has to do at least that, but usually much better. And that's a much different situation than we were even a couple of years ago when, flat money capital was really cheap.
I'm going to ask, has it turned up? I mean, have you 2024 looking better?
2024 is definitely better. Cool. I would say the words I've been using is way better, on the way to good again.
Okay. Well, that's
good as a process.
Yeah. Okay. Because everybody else is talking about how it's falling to shit. So I don't see that either. I see it kind of upticking, but
I mean, not to go political on you, and I won't, I promise, but we're in a general election year.
Yeah, it affects things.
It does. And if you look historically over, time about what it does to this industry, is there's usually that fall pause.
Yeah.
No matter who wins or who's running or whatever, until after the election is decided. And, I think you're starting to see some of that, the slowdown a little
100%.
bit. The other thing that we've seen is I think it's been since the 1950s that every presidential election year has been the stock market has grown, but not always consistently across the board. It's ended higher than it began.
Right.
So we could still see that. Actually, we're already in that case.
You see that right now in 2024. Yeah. I was just looking at that this morning. Yep.
Even after the correction we saw last week or whenever this thing is going to go live. Right. But, and I do believe that post November, no matter who wins, there'll be another bump.
Yeah, it usually is. Everybody calms down and they're like, shit, I actually have to do something. Yes, you do. Now let's do it.
Markets like certainty.
They do. For sure. I mean, you're spending, so do you, so do I. I mean, if I'm spending my money on stuff, I want to make sure I'm not just flushing down the toilet. Make sure I'm getting something at least.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Did you have to let anybody go?
Yep.
Yeah.
We did. Yeah. That was the right business decision to make.
Yeah.
That's
hard.
It is. It's very hard.
Yeah.
But it's also what had to be done. That's not something that I will ever enjoy.
Right.
But you learn a lot having to go through that.
Really. I'll have to say the largest my business has ever been, we had 8 employees. So that's, that's the largest I've ever seen. And we had some really bad times, and pretty much everyone, I'm going to say got laid off, but we kind of went out of business. So however you want to look at that, but I helped those that I could find other jobs, and that we helped each other and stuff like that. I've never been through that myself. I've never had to, but in that situation, it was like, well, everyone, we're all in the same level here. It's not like I'm saying, well, you have to go so that these people can stay. That's a very different conversation. And I've heard horror stories from both perspectives on how those types of things go down. Some good, some bad, like there's a way to approach it, there is not to approach it. How did you guys approach that? I'm sure with honesty and transparency, but that only gets you so far, right?
It does. There's still hard decisions to make, right? Like it's a different animal when you're reducing staff.
Yeah.
Because you're starting with something that can work, right? And it's really interesting, especially in the service game, right? Which is, Sparkbox is a service provider.
Right.
And, anytime you always have 2 choices when there's not enough work. You can either grow the revenue to fit the team, or fit the team to match the revenue you currently have.
Right.
And that's what we had to do. And it's,
yeah, because it's like we're trying to do the other one too.
Yeah. No. It wasn't I'm trying.
Yeah.
It was just realities were there, and they, like payrolls keep running, right?
Yeah. That never stops.
So, it really was taking a hard look at every position and, crafting something that was going to be sustainable outside of something that was. And, I'm sure there are people that would second guess those decisions, and I did not make them alone.
Sure.
Of course, but, we have a, pretty defined pay structure with different levels in it. And, one of the things in a service business is it runs on leverage. You can't just we couldn't have just kept all of our most senior people.
Right.
Because then there's no margins.
Right.
And so we actually had to look at how do we build a business outside of what this is that can still, run a profit.
Right. Right. Yeah. What's the point if you're not doing that? Just shut the whole thing down. Like at that point.
Yeah.
Well, when was that? When was that in the calendar year?
That was first quarter. We recognized it pretty quick. Yeah.
Wow, that's interesting. So, like, I will tell you, whenever what year was that? 2007. I don't know. It was a long time ago, but for me, it was sort of like when I finally figured it out, it was kind of too late. You know what I mean? 'Cause it was like, oh, yeah, this is where we are, everyone. We kind of, today's the day, like sort of a thing like that. I love the fact that I actually love the fact that you kind of caught it early. You kind of saw it.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure it felt not early enough for some.
I mean, come on. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there is very few graceful ways to tell people that have put their trust in you that they no longer are, their services are no longer needed here.
Right.
But
you're looking forward though, that's a very different thing, looking forward and looking at these plans and, projecting things and just looking at it versus reacting to something. It's very different. And I feel like maybe most of the time when we hear these stories, it's from people just reacting,
Yeah.
And I think that's a testament to your leadership in your ability to have been looking forward in the first place. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's a little bit of both, right? Like it's knowing what your metrics are, knowing what the plan is, knowing what things look like, and knowing, what happens. Like one of the things that I've had the habit of for years is when I see bad forecast or when I see things possible, is I will schedule the meeting to talk about the hard decisions that have to be made.
Oh, wow.
Before things turn around, and say like, okay, this is, I always call it the windmill meeting. And okay, I'll have to explain this because I've already used the term. Back to the Future 3, right?
Right.
We're in the Old West. And there's that windmill, and that's the last possible time they can turn the train off and the DeLorean can stop and they can save the time machine, right?
You're making a Back to the Future 3 reference, my friend.
I am. And here's where I'm going.
Okay.
So I call that the windmill meeting because that's the last time we can still make the decisions we need to make.
I love it.
And skip across the old bridge. The new bridge is going to be there in the future, right?
Right.
So like I've done that for years, schedule these meetings off into the future and put them on the leadership team's calendar or on my partner's calendar or whatever, or even my own calendar if I go way, 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 way back. And I've never, ever had to have the meeting up until last year.
Wow.
So I knew what it was. I was prepared for it. I knew that we were going to have this hard meeting if these things didn't happen. So it was the planning that goes into that. And for years it's been, because there's always things in a business as you're growing that, and there was times that we'd never like, I'll just cancel the meeting. We're good.
Right. Wow. But you put it on the calendar.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. Sorry, I'm just thinking about my own, like, hey, I'm going to put this meeting on my calendar for potential bad stuff.
Yeah.
If we don't need it, we don't need it. But if we do, there it is. And that's when we're going to have it.
Yeah. Well, it prepares everybody. It's that transparency across your other leaders in your company. And that's why I've always looked at it is like, hey, I don't want you to be surprised by this. I've been thinking about it. Here's some conditions that can change the reality of having to have that meeting. But if not, let's all walk in prepared to do the things we need to do.
So is that also sort of a way to keep people focused?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think it is. I mean, people always will look at the facts they know and write their own stories, right?
Right. Okay.
And I think that, part of that transparency and sharing and providing that interpretation of things will say like, hey, this is where things are headed. Here's the things that, here's things that maybe they're in the pipeline. Maybe they're things that could happen. Maybe things we think are going to happen. But these are the hinging decisions that we need to, shore up.
So shifting gears a little bit.
Okay.
If you're doing all this thinking and planning, How do you have time for yourself?
Well, how do I have time? I mean, that is my job to do that thinking.
Sure.
So
it sounds like a pretty full-time job to me.
Can be. With 65 people, it definitely was.
Yeah.
We're a little smaller now and it's not quite as full-time job. It really depends on, I think, what season you're in. If you're in a growth season, a stabilization season, or like there's different seasons require different kinds of planning, different kinds of things, right?
Okay.
And some of that gets back to the conversation we were having about trusting your gut, right? Like if there's things that you think that you can count on, it's a little bit easier. It's when everything starts changing, even the things you think that you really have to like have a moment about, right? But I think that like this gets into this idea of, I think about designing your life, right? Like I've got spots on my calendar where I do my workouts and those don't move.
Yeah.
Nobody can schedule over them. Those are times when those are my times. Even I've gotten, some grief in my marriage about those times not moving as, being as flexible. That's not, I wouldn't say flexibility in my schedule is my strength.
Okay.
But the rigidity provides that mechanism for habits and discipline, right? So, it's putting things that are non-negotiable on my calendar that I'm going to do. And of course, if there's something, that has to be moved, we can move it, but that's a choice that I can make.
Yeah.
The default is I'm going to do the things I need to do. And same thing with, when meetings happen, what days I'm going to do what in the business, what days I'm going to work out, spending some time every day getting smarter. Like I've got a spot on my calendar where I spend 30 days where I can do podcasts, reading, articles, just get better at that job.
It's very intentional, man.
Yes.
I dig it. That is another. So how do you then trickle that down to, you I don't know the structure of your business, but you're talking about you, and then you have a layer of leadership, and you have a layer of, project implementer, whatever you want to call it, designers, developers, project managers. But like, how do you let that trickle down to them? I mean, I don't imagine. I know you. I don't imagine it's like, hey, everyone needs to be like me.
No,
but I do know you, and I do imagine you do have a level of expectation that everybody has their shit together.
Yeah. Well, it's the deals you make, right? It's the expectations, right? Clarity is kindness, and you set clear expectations.
Yeah.
One of the biggest expectations that I have with my team is you're going to do what you say you're going to do. I'm not going to tell you the deadline of something. I'm going to ask you when this is going to be done.
Right.
Your job is to tell me accurately and be honestly when it can be done.
Right.
And, my expectation then, if we have agreed upon deadline for something, is that if I don't hear from you, it will be done by when we agreed.
Right.
The thing that drives me bonkers is when deadlines go whizzing by my head and I don't know about it. If something legitimately happens and you're being intentional about getting it done, you can let me know beforehand.
Yeah.
And if you tell me, hey, this happened, this thing we agreed upon is going to push out a week, I'm like, oh, good, that's great, right? Or
everyone's cool,
right? Or man, that's really a dependent thing. Can we talk about priority real quick, right?
Yeah.
Like that's my expectation for how I want to manage people, because I'm not a micromanager. I do not want to tell people how to do their job. They will not do it like I will, and that's fine. I will not do it like them. My gifts and my limitations are different than their gifts and limitations. And if I've actually surrounded myself with the right people, they're going to be real different than me.
Yeah.
And that's actually
that's that whole, if you're the smartest person in the room, get in another room for sure.
Exactly.
How do you deal with not micromanaging people? Is it just like, is it something that Rob doesn't do? Or is it like, because I mean, I'm not a micromanager either, but it don't mean I don't worry about that stuff.
I don't worry a lot as a general rule.
Okay.
I don't know why. I just don't. The other thing is,
do you think that's maybe because you came up doing the work?
maybe.
So, I mean, so just your path was, I mean, you were a developer, you did the work, you worked up to management, you started your own business, you did work in the business, managed projects in the business, the sales in the business, and now you're the president, CEO, whatever you want to call it, of the business. Like, do you think it's because that's the path?
I think it's more gets back down to that trust thing. I trust the people that work for me are also good at their job. That's why they're here. And every single person that ever has been hired at Sparkbox, and I've interviewed every single one of them over the years, all couple hundred people that we've ended up employing, has heard me say the following: I'm not going to be your babysitter. And if you need one, you won't be happy here. And if it comes down to it,
right.
If we have to choose, I get to stay.
Yeah, well, it's ideally the perfect scenario. Yes.
Yeah. So like we've been really like hiring on values and hiring people that want that autonomy and that trust and that that stewardship kind of delegation model.
Right.
Has always been a priority. So when you have people who want to take both responsibility and accountability, because those two things go hand in hand. People will always say they want more responsibility. And my first response is always, if you want more responsibility, let's define what kind of accountability you need to go with it. You cannot have one without the other.
Right.
And if you think you can, then you've missed the boat.
Wow. I like that. I like that stewardship model. I've never heard that before. I'm going to credit you with inventing that, but
don't credit me. 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
Is it? Okay. Okay. But I like that idea of that versus straight up like managing someone. There's nothing worse than like coming in and having to worry about filling someone's day.
Yeah.
That like shoot me. Like, oh my gosh.
Don't want to do it. That's
nah.
Like, and that's, that's in that book, they talk about 2 different models, right? The gopher model, which is go do this and come back and tell me. That makes me responsible for the outcome.
Yeah.
Or the stewardship model, which is we define SMART goals. We define what resources I'm giving you. We ask, then we say, when can this be done? We agree upon a deadline and then say, how can I help you achieve those? What do you need from me?
Let me ask you this. We're talking about expectations and holding people accountable. How do you then hold them to a level of quality? I find that's the most difficult thing. I feel like I'm getting a lot of therapy here from you.
It's okay.
I appreciate it.
No, always.
Do not send me an invoice, by the way.
I will not send you an invoice.
I'm just kidding.
Or really? No, I'm kidding. How do you hold people responsible for quality? I think that gets back to making sure you're hiring people in line with your values.
Okay.
And knowing what kind of stuff they produce, right?
Yeah.
And you put in systems that nobody wants to show up with bad quality stuff, right? Because I think you have to get to the root of why bad quality sometimes shows up. Is it because there's not enough time? Because not enough resources? Because you don't care? Because something happened? Right? And each one of those has a different solve, right?
Right.
Like, not enough time. Well, why wasn't there enough time? I'm not assigning deadlines. You told me what the deadline was.
Right.
Did something happen? Okay, did we not communicate about that in a reasonable amount of time so that we could change the realities and have more quality? Was there, do you not care? Okay, I can't care for you.
Right, that's the easy one.
Like, that's an easy one. Like, that's the thing that I tell managers and leaders all the time is one of the best ways to ruin your own mental state is to try to care more than the people you're managing.
Yeah.
That will destroy you and never leave you in ruins as a human. You can't do it.
Also turn you into a micromanager. Yeah.
Yeah. And so your level of caring can only equal the person that you're trying to lead or manage.
Okay.
About that thing, whatever it is, right?
I feel like you've thought about everything.
I don't think so.
But I mean, like managing or working with that many people, like I bet you've seen a lot of the scenarios that
this
might take 2 years for it to evolve for me. You probably see it in a couple of weeks.
You do, but this gets back to, I think, the place where we started is management's also a skill that you invest in, that you get better in. Yeah. There's inputs you can take in, right? Like, it's not, I I feel like there's this, especially in small business culture, and especially the studio creative space, we get such a distaste for what we think management is that we're like, I don't want to do that. I'm going to have self-managing teams. I'm going to do this. I'm not going to be a manager. I'm not going to do reviews for you. I'm not going to provide all the things that management says, right? Because we didn't have good versions of that to look up to.
Right.
We didn't have good role models. So we're like, nope, I'm checking out on that.
I'm not that guy. Yeah.
Right. And then we don't invest in those skill sets. And we wonder why we don't get the results we want. And I hate the term like self-managing teams, because that puts the onus on the individual. What I think I would rather say is I want good, strong managers with those skill sets. I want empowered teams that have autonomy, that they've earned and they're accountable for.
Wow. That's a strong team, dude.
That's a really strong team.
Yeah. You can get a lot of shit done. And make good money.
And I think most humans that I run into that actually had a good manager that took that craft seriously, they appreciate it.
You just said the magic word, my friend. Craft. We talk about craft on this show a lot. I believe in it 100%. And I think whatever it is you're doing, you should approach it from the mindset of I am working on my craft. This is my craft. I own it. I want to make myself the best at it. And it is craft. Everything we do is craft.
Yeah. We are what we continuously do, right?
Yeah. Yep. So, I mean, I've asked you this before, but like, how much of you're from Ohio. How much of the Midwestern like mindset is that from? I mean, you're just a very practical dude.
I don't know. That's a hard thing to answer, not being from anywhere else.
Yeah.
Not to be.
You've traveled everywhere, man.
I have. So I'm a son of an engineer. My dad was software engineer that graduated in the late 70s. So I'm probably one of the first or whatever second generation software engineers, kind of the way that works.
Yeah, probably.
Dad studied computer science. I studied computer science.
Did you go to the same school?
Nope.
Oh, okay.
He did not go to the same school. But I think so there's definitely some of that. And I don't think it's an accident. My dad was an engineer. I was a software engineer. Yeah. My sister has a PhD in materials engineering. Wow. And my brother he was applied mathematics and physics undergrad and applied math grad. So
okay.
I'm actually
your whole family is pragmatic and numbers focused. Okay.
So I don't know how much that's Midwest or how much of that was just our house.
Okay. All right.
Like my dad was very much like he always made you explain things and wanted to talk about things and had some other interesting methods. Like, he was in the Army and all that. So I get a lot of yes, sir, no, ma'am.
Yeah.
A lot of that.
Right. Me too.
The territory.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow.
So, yeah.
How about your kids, man? How I know your kids are high school. No, high school and middle school, right?
Yep. I've got junior in high school right now and an 8th grader. Yeah.
Yeah. So what do you think the path for those guys is going to be? Is it going to be mathematics based, or are they going
to? My junior wants to study pharmacy.
Okay.
At the Ohio State University.
Okay.
He's a tuba player. He wants to dot the I someday.
Okay.
And he has all of the skill sets and resources and smarts to do whatever he wants.
That's awesome.
He's a smart kid.
That's cool.
My daughter, I don't know yet. She is she's more of just a free spirit and a little bit different than any of us here.
Right. That's good too.
I'm not sure her path exists yet.
Yeah. That's an awful lot of pressure to put on a kid.
Yeah.
In 8th grade, like even junior year, man. Like I'm sending my youngest off to college on Saturday.
Wow.
Yeah, it's baking my noodle, man. cry about it like every day. Like, but I'm also happy. I mean, it's not like a sad thing, but it's just like, what's going on? But like, man, they start on them like 10th grade. Like, what college? What are you going to be forever? What college are you going to study? It's like, man, let them get out. I mean,
he's known. His answer hasn't changed since he's a freshman.
Wow, that's impressive.
I'm still not convinced that that's exactly where he'll end up.
Yeah, who knows? Yeah,
but it's like anything else, though, right? Like humans don't always need goals so they can get to that destination. They need goals to calibrate the journey.
Right.
And it's been a good goal to calibrate his journey.
Yeah, for sure.
Do things, because the thing that I tell him all the time, tell both my kids really, is every single decision you make or don't make either expands future options and opportunities or limits them.
I like that too.
Let's make decisions that give you more options and opportunities.
Right.
You will never, ever, ever be upset with having too many opportunities and options.
Right.
The times in my life where I've been really kind of irritated is when, I have these two bad choices to choose between.
Yeah, for sure. That's not good.
No,
man.
So that's the question I'm always asking. Like, hey, Dad, I want to go do this. Hey, and like, I mean, obviously there's a bunch of things that don't matter, but it's the things that do. It's like, hey, is this like, how are you going to approach this to make sure that you have more options after you're done?
Yeah, for sure. Did you, when you were going to college, to school after high school, did you know did you go in as the thing that you came out as?
I did. Yeah. I knew, growing up in a house that surrounded by computers and that kind of stuff. I was 12 and I was like, I'm going to go do what Dad does.
We do this stuff. Yeah.
So I actually decided when I was, 12, 13, 14, that I wanted to study computer science. And I actually want my career goal at that time was to work at a place called LexisNexis.
Oh, yeah.
And it just so happened that was my first professional job, was working there.
Wow, man.
And my dad had started working there as well about 9 months before I did.
Okay.
So we worked together for a couple of years.
That's cool.
But I had a little bit of a moment about 5 years into that job, and I loved that job. Okay, I cannot imagine a better way to start my career because I got to do all kinds of cool things, and it really was the perfect first step for me. But I remember being in my, I guess I was like mid to late 20s, having this moment of like, okay, I've achieved my goals. I've graduated. I'm doing computer science. I'm a working professional software person.
Yeah.
And I'm working at the job that I said I always wanted. And am I really going to be here for the next, 40 years?
Yeah, right.
27 to 67, which is my full retirement age, right?
That's right.
40 years. Is this what I'm going to do? And I was like, no, I guess I need to come up with some other things.
Wow. Even intentional then.
Yeah. Well,
sometimes. That's fascinating, man. Mine was, I got laid off. I started doing freelance graphic design, and then I just got enough business to where I was like, well, I guess this is what I do now. It's never look back. It's kind of funny how you were like, I'm going to make this choice. And I like it. But there's a lesson there, man. There's a lesson there. There's a lesson there about being a leader, working on your craft of being a leader, is that to be intentional, you have to plan. And like I said, I know you don't over plan. I've talked to you about your plans and stuff before, and it's very, they're very workable. They're very no nonsense. They make sense, but you have to do it.
I think you have to do it. And I think it's that whole idea of, I always like to say I walk through life with really strong beliefs, loosely held.
Right.
I think I know what I might know, but I'm not holding on tight. I'm curious. I'm open to being wrong about a lot of things.
Well, it's something in all your slides. I don't know if you still put it in there, but you always put in the bottom corner, it's like your mileage may vary.
Always.
And I love that about giving someone advice. A lot of times we get I don't know, you probably have mentors and people that coach you and stuff like that, but you'll get this, they're like, do this, you're like, I mean, how do you know, and it's like, but coming with that perspective of like, well, this is an idea. It might work, it might work better in this scenario. It might work half-ass in this scenario, but like, this is a thing you can do.
I thought about writing a book or doing a podcast called "It Depends" and Other Answers You May Not Like.
I'd probably do pretty well.
Yeah. I mean, because I think you're right. Like the answer is almost always, it depends.
Yeah.
But a really good consultant or mentor will say the next part, which is, and here's what it depends on.
Yeah. Right.
And it's always more nuanced than that, right?
Yeah. Everything's got nuance.
Yeah. Like anybody very few things are completely binary. That's just not the way the world works. There is, the longer I'm alive and the longer I'm in business, the more gray you see. And well, it depends. Like, how do you want to approach that? And what options have you given yourself?
Mm-hmm. Wise words, man.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for sharing. That was really insightful, man. I always leave smarter talking to you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, man. Well, let's sign off here. And any parting wisdom you got for anybody?
No, I think just, keep after it, right? Like, with most things in life, you fail when you quit, not when something else happens. So
hell yeah. Never give up.
Yeah.
And
or give up or step off the wave, right? Like
sure.
Sometimes you got to intentionally quit too.
Yeah. But that's one sexy shirt, man.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
I got to get me one of those.
Yeah.
All right.
All right.
Thanks, man.